Sounds good. All right, so we're going to present Banssus Woberā next, the Sepânioi Rotî water cultus. The name means custom of the well. It's actually been one of the more challenging cultus to develop because it's such a massive component of our practices across the current members. Today we're going to focus on the duality of water in our custom. Next slide. We see this duality manifest in the cycle of life and death, with the life-giving aspects of water morphing into its role in the afterlife. Its healing properties were also tied to curses. I plague curses, but also all sorts of different aspects. Tablets in healing springs asking for the Dewoi to exact vengeance. And the symbolic role of water in the world demonstrates both a flow and a constant presence that promotes inner stillness when we can find it. The next slide, of course, water is a liminal space. It's very adaptable, and it shows how to move through our life and approach challenges. Our practice can be focused on the philosophical nature of water in our worldview, or on the next slide, as well as being more literal. On the next slide, we can engage in water's healing properties and as a medium to connect us to the Dewoi, cleansing the mind and body. Kuno, can we go to the next one? Thank you. So like we incorporate shower prayers, which are a large component of our custom, or offerings of tea and coffee, or cleansing ourselves for rituals. These aren't unique to our custom, of course, but as we develop our new custom, these are the ideas, ideals, and concepts that we'll be building on and that we'll focus on as we develop our practice centered on balance and devotional act. So next we have life and death, specifically focused on that. It's the most prominent duality of water cultus. It's the fertility of the waters that goes hand in hand with the oceans and wells being such strong chthonic symbols and even portals to the lands of the dead. We'll look at some of the basic ways that water ties into both of these concepts and how they connect with our custom. Next slide. Water is liminal, of course. In all aspects of our custom, the liminality of water as a pathway to the Dewoi and to our ancestors as a boundary between worlds is at the core of how we incorporate it into our practice. When we invoke the Dewoi during shower prayers, we're counting on the running water to carry our words to them. In our more metaphorical practice of water cultus, when we practice flexibility and adaptability in our lives, we're constantly reassessing where our boundaries lie for ourselves and the people around us. Water's liminality is also the tie between life and death. It allows the fertility of the other worlds to reach us and our messages to our ancestors to reach them, and the reverse direction as well, of course. Next, the source of life. I've been fascinated with the idea of chthonic fertility in the Celtic sphere since I started exploring Gaulish polytheism and just paganism at large. This is a recent development for me because it just ties in so well with what we know about the natural world and human history. Life literally formed and emerged from primordial seas, and as humanity evolved, our societies formed around rivers and seas. They formed the borders of our nations. Gaul itself is framed by a sea to the south, an ocean to the west, a channel to the north, and the river Rhine, who we'll get into in greater detail later, to the east. Water is just so core to life and society. It's so unique in how it freezes, how it moves through our world. Without all the unique properties of water, life wouldn't exist at all, as far as we know. maybe in some far off place, they've figured something else out. But on our world, water is at the heart of everything. So in our practice, we often give thanks to the waters for providing us with life. And next, I also want to acknowledge how closely water is related with the sun, with healing springs being places of worship and communion with sun Dewoi, like Sulis, Bellissima, possibly Bellanos, Granus, possibly Bellanos, certainly Granus. I think it deepens that life-giving relationship. It just brings such a fascinating complexity to Dewoi, who have this chthonic aspect of wells and springs, but also heavenly light or fire, both of which form the necessary ingredients for life. Water and light. And if you've ever gone through a really long winter, the return of running water and the warm sun is a magical time. My whole body relaxes when I hear the snow melting, which brought Bellanos into my realm of interest. Personally, I've got red and orange tulips that grow in my garden at that time of year, and we even have a full tulip festival here. Um, so Kuno and I have discussed honoring Bellissima and maybe other solar Dewoid this time as the return of life to this world, which I tried a little bit late this year, but it was something that I really wanted to incorporate into my practice. Next, though, we're going to turn our attention to death. As we discussed earlier, waters being this liminal place, a door to the other world. Lake, river, ocean, and bog sacrifices all demonstrate the strong connection between the Celtic realm of the dead and their physical places on this planet. In some of our practices, Nehalenia plays a strong role as both a protective dewa at sea and on travels, but also as a psychopomp bringing the souls of the dead to the depths of the oceans where they can take part in an eternal feast. It's the oceans are where we call to for ancestor worship, including in daily devotional acts that may involve them. Next, though it's seemingly paradoxical, and I mean I've kind of explained it a little bit, but waters being the source of life in the land of the dead, it's inherent to its place in our practice and theology. We look to the cycle of water through this world, Bitus, to inform us on the cycle of reincarnation. See the flow of water from deep wells into our world, into the heavens, back down again, all throughout as a sign of the fluidity of the soul and of the afterlife. It's something that we haven't fleshed out, but you're going to see us explore as we develop our custom into potentially a full tradition. Next slide. Where there is life, where there is death, there is life. Death is also tied to life through ancient rituals. Hunting in particular was seen as a renewal of life through spilling blood onto the earth. Miranda Green talks about it and mentions it quickly in World of the Druids, I believe. We see this in other forms, like in bogs that are terrible for humans to live in, but they foster so much life beyond our own. I live in a pretty swampy part of the world, and the mosquitoes this time of year are insane. But that's life. It's not good for us, but it's life for everything else. And even the water itself is teeming with life. But don't you dare drink it. A member of our community also, I believe it was Drost, Ren, brought up how Gallo-Romans, to Gallo-Romans, Mori being the oceans must have been such clear imagery for them if they grew up with Latin, where Mori is death, that they're so connected. As all these little pieces of information will all come together as Water Cultus grows as part of our custom. And that takes us to healing and vengeance, which I'll pass things off to Freyson to talk about, and he's going to give us some more details on how they fit into our practice.
All right, cool. I will do so. Hey, I'm Reynos Folston, the artist formerly known as Freyson. So you may recognize me more under that name, but the profile picture I kept the same, so there should be some sort of logical connection there. All right, so we're going to be talking about healing versus vengeance, and vengeance. So a big part of water in our practice is that it almost mimics the human soul on a cosmic level, which is something that Nertatis touched on earlier. Um, and in the same way as humans are capable of healing one another and also harming one another, so too can water do that, just on a much larger scale. Kuno, if you'll take it to the next slide, please. Perfect. So we're talking a lot about the rise and fall, specifically of water levels. Water can bring much need. I mean, it's needed for pretty much any biosphere to grow. So it brings much needed nutrients, animals. It's absolutely fantastic. However, rivers can, as they provide, swell and drown the land by doing too much, or a river may also dwindle down and evaporate. This is a lot of the duality. So, and as water and rivers and seas themselves are to do, the devoid of water are known to provide for their people, but there's really no one that does divine fury kind of like they do, which we'll touch on in a second here. Take to the next slide. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the inherently healing properties of a lot of water. This is primarily exhibited through the many, many localized Gaulish hot spring gods that we have. I mean, we have, Belinos, various versions thereof. We have Vinderos over in Helvetia. I mean, pretty much every single healing spring in most of Central Europe had its own deivoi in charge of it, which just goes to show how very important it was to the people who live there and how important it still is to this day. They were universally appealing, not only to the Gauls, but also the Romans and the Gallo-Romans who came afterwards. And to this day, water is a huge part of healing. In physical therapy, water aerobics, but also in personal care. I mean, there's nothing more healing or more relaxing than when you sit in a bathtub with some Epsom salts and a bath bomb, one of those nice lavender scented ones or whatever rocks your boat. It's absolutely cleansing for the body, mind, and soul. And that's how water can provide. However, and if you're going to go on to the next one, next slide, Kuno, we also have cures and curses. So while the water is also capable of healing, in a strange twist, it was also deemed an incredibly powerful place for vengeance. Curse tablets come in here. So many, many different wells and hot springs had inscribed tablets on which curses were written. And that's actually how we get a lot of information about deivoi. A lot of the writing about Ogmios, if I'm not mistaken, is actually from curse tablets as well. And it's sometimes that the well itself was cursed, but more often the tablets were asking for the power of the well or the spring in order to curse their enemies. And if you go to the next slide. Perfect. So, and another one is hounds. So dogs are actually a really, really strange thing. They fit in with a lot of the liminal aspects, especially death and life after death, but they're also associated with the healing springs because they embody many of the same characteristics. So dogs, oh, thanks, Morikunos. Thanks very much. Dogs are protective, and they also have, let's see, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, there you go. They have a special place in the homes of Gauls, which we can intuit from the fact of how important hounds were in the neighboring society's home. So we know this a lot from later texts written about some of the Germanic tribes that lived in the same area. If you look at some of the law codes, there were very, very specific laws discerning someone's dog. A lot of these law codes talk about, if a man wrongs someone this way, if he commits this kind of crime, this is what the fine will be. However, if a man's dog wrongs another man, or if a man's dog is wronged, it's like 4 more paragraphs. These were incredibly important to everyday life for the Galatas back then. They are associated also with very many water deities, such as Nehelenia or the matrons of the Rhineland. They're often commonly depicted with dogs. And in the same way that water and the human soul is almost tri-worldly in that it goes into all 3 worlds, so too is a dog, because it interacts with the soil, the water, as well as right here on Earth in our homes. Go to the next slide, please. All right. And we are going to talk about seas themselves. So oceans have another huge duality as well. Shipwrecks, they're something that is incredibly feared. But at the same point in time, for many, many cultures that lived near the edges of waters and the edges of seas, the sea was their sole source of livelihood, of income. They would get their fish there, they would get pelts there. More north, but there was also a lot of whaling that took place near the sea. So the sea provided for the people, but it was also to be feared and to be respected because a single event, like a particularly large wave or a bad fishing season, would mean ruin for the people. Next slide, please. Right, we're going to talk about stillness and flow, which is going to be another one of the dualities between the water. And this is specifically about rivers and bogs or swamps. Next slide, please. So, water is an incredibly great teacher. And this is how it factors into a huge part of our daily cultus. Because, as I hinted on earlier, is that water is almost a mimicry, or we're a mimicry of it, of humans on a cosmic scale, capable of different dualistic reactions to various scenarios. But what it teaches us above everything is to be flexible and adaptable, both fluid and still, kind and vengeful. Next slide, please. The reason stillness is important, like this is what we can learn from a pond or a clear lake early in the morning, is that it is important to rest. There's an absolutely great strength trainer, sidetracking into the world of physical fitness. His name is Pavel Tsatsouline, and he talks phenomenally about how you don't become stronger in the middle of your workout. Lifting weights isn't going to make you incredibly powerful. It's actually the waiting afterwards. It's the healing. It's allowing the rebuild. And that is the same thing for growth. If you were looking to expand your knowledge in pretty much any field, what's important is that we take time to be still, time to reflect, time to recover, and then apply. However, stillness can be a double-edged sword. If we sit too much, we may end up getting used to it, and that is entropy, which is what Kuno was talking about in the very beginning of the presentation, is that that is just as bad because it leads to stagnation. Next slide, please. And flexibility. A little bit early in the presentation, I had that wonderful quote from Bruce Lee, which I do think might have been better putting it at this part. But water is wonderful because over time, water can change any landmass to its will through erosion. And a lot of that happens gradually and over time. The same way we can't force the world to be what we want it to be within a couple of weeks. To some extent, that is possible, if you have enough cans of soup, but not in every single situation. Some things we have to erode over time. And this teaches us to be flexible and patient. This way we can affect the landscape over time. Next page, please. Now, water connects people across trades and travel routes. Water connects people of various different cultural and religious groups. Two very, very notable aspects, which were already mentioned before, is the North Sea and the Rhine River. Those were not only important parts for the Gauls, but also the Gallo-Romans, the Germanic tribes of the area. And as such, water allowed all of them to flourish, and it connects people. And even in a society today where we not as reliant on fishing anymore, we can emulate water by connecting with other people. Next slide, please. And this does lead to the water devoy being spread all across Gaul, Britain, and it leads to a very, very unique spread of cultural interaction. So great examples of this are Reynos, Thulis, Granos, Bellanos. All of these gods are worshipped in a very, very wide swath of places and from many different cultures because they were transported with the water. Water in practice. So water in practice is a very abstract concept. Nertatis and I went back on this for quite a bit until we finally settled on a couple things. But even then, water is a liminal space in ritual and prayers. It's a great place to make offerings to devoy, as well as the ancestors. You can use it itself if you were presenting it, water is a very, very great offering to make as well. And it does connect into all three worlds. So, water is a wonderful place to make an offering, be that to a celestial deity, or be that to a god of the underworld, or even one that is here and bid us with us. Um, you can also integrate water into various different ways and aspects of your practice, which is stuff we do like water for cleansing, or it can even be imported into agricultural cultus by growing flowers or vegetable gardens. Next slide. So, water in our practices is also used by shower prayers. This is actually something that Maracunas has really led in the Discord, and it talks a lot about shower prayers, giving thanks in the shower, finding a way to purify and prepare for the day. Um, it's really, really great way and a wonderful habit to build up those daily practices, to enrich ourselves and then others, as Kuno mentioned earlier. Um, and it's just a great place to sit. Next slide, please. All right. And so now we're talking a little bit about the gods, and I am gonna pass it back to Nertatus because he did most of the research on these first few ones.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll start off with Nodens. Speaking of dogs being strange, so Nodens is a god of the depths, healing and hunting, both connected through through dogs. Pardon me. Dreams, iron, war, vigor, vengeance. His temple is fascinating. I mentioned dreams. There's a space for people to sleep and to heal through dreams, but it's also there's this providing aspect from fishing and hunting and all these different things. So we pointed to a couple tenets for notice, like provide for those around you, through the fishing and the feeding of the community. There's always more to be discovered is one that we came up with when looking at this idea of the mysteries of the depths and the bounties of the depths, and to always be looking forward to have a hunger for knowledge and for new experiences. So devotional acts can include fishing and hunting and martial arts. If you're looking a little more literally, for martial arts, there was a devotional tablet at one of the sites from a weapons instructor, a Roman soldier, I believe. You can explore a new area, host a meal, to offer food to your friends and family, growing food, or lucid dreaming, like I was saying, that sleep chamber in the temple. Next slide. Coventina is the source of the waters, whose life, joy. She's tied to wishes and not quite oaths, but similar concepts. She was revered across Britain and adopted readily by the Romans, and worship especially for the light side of water cultus. So we decided that statements of being truthful in your actions and strive for the headwaters. They're the source of life and understanding. That came from Morikunos, his journey through water cultus and these different the change in his practice, really tied into that to looking for the source of your beliefs of the truth that you're looking for. So devotional acts, worship near springs and wells, ties into her being the source of water, whereas other deities might have more to do with rivers and oceans. Expressions of honesty through being truthful, research and self-discovery, looking for that the headwaters, as we'd said in the tenets, and self-empowerment as well. Next, we have Sulis, water and fire. Sulis was famously a healing goddess of hot, iron-rich springs. She's associated with the dawn, which gives us themes of renewal and joy. So we have every day is a new beginning, and endings are the starts of new journeys, and to revel in the joys of life. Devotional acts include trying new things, getting out of your comfort zone, enjoying a new experience. Next, we have Reynos Patera. I don't know if you want to jump back in.
Yeah, you can clearly tell I'm back in my comfort zone. Hey, hello. Yeah, so we're going to talk about Reynos Patera a little bit. That's one of the examples of a cross-cultural god. What we do know about Reynos Patera is that he was a Gaulish deity, primarily, first and foremost. We know Germanic tribes of the area worshipped the Rhine as well, but we're not 100% sure what their interpretation might have been. But where Reynos Patera really took off was with the Romans and subsequently the Gallo-Romans that moved or that became later. He's the personification of the Rhine River. And depictions of him make their way all the way up to Jutland or Denmark and all the way down even to Greece. There was a lot of pottery that was transported down there, bearing images of what is assumed to be Reynos Patera. Some of the tenets would be give joy to yourself and others, be gracious. A lot of it is ensure that right is done or justice prevails, and those who violate the goodwill of others or go against the gods deserve the consequences of their actions. He is a god of the underworld, but more specifically, the rivers of the underworld. A lot of fertility. He has wine associations. Devotional acts would include meditation, research, studying, and rowing as a hobby if you wanted to pick up something athletic, and helping those in need and giving them the tools to do so. So whether that be reading up on workers' rights and informing your fellow coworkers about what the boss is doing and whether or not that's okay, or whether it's offering someone a place to sleep if they're not going through a hard time, or offering to help out a friend financially if you know they need it. And all of this again is done without any sort of anticipation for reciprocation. And next slide, please. And lastly, we have Bellissima. Bellissima was a powerful and revered goddess. She even survives into modern day Italian language with Bellissimo or Bellissima, meaning and derived names meaning beautiful or sublime. The Romans did synchronize her very heavily with Minerva, and that shows in a lot of the imagery. And she may have been paired with Belenus due to their names and very similar cultus. There's been some absolutely great literature put out by a certain member of the community who may or may not know a thing or two about Belenus, about the two of them being a celestial force with associated rising water together. She also has a lot of mountain connotations. Some stuff for her would be holding fast against turmoil or in the face of oppression, celebrating life and protecting what's important, and most of all, standing up for yourself and being true to your own self. She would be very applicable to social justice, settling disputes, acts of joys, celebration, self-expression, and a very positive light side of the water cultus. All right, and thank you so much. So that is it for the water cultus, and the next up we have the growth cultus.